Well, welcome back, friends. It is Wednesday, the day after Valentine's Day. I hope you did something nice for your wife, her putting up with you after all this time.
You can count. You can count on it that whatever winning is, that's me.
That's you. You did a great job. I'm sure
you did too. So what did your wife buy herself?
Well, I don't know. We're not that close. Just whatever you need to get, go ahead. I love you, honey. You get it.
That's where we are after 22, going on 23 years of marriage. Is I have had so many epic fails that it just comes down to it's Valentine's Day. It's coming up.
Yeah.
Please buy yourself something.
Please buy something really nice, but just not over $10.
Something $10. Listen to you.
All right, we got to get at this today. We are so grateful that you're with us. Know that it was a great week at Huntersville and Denver because you heard other people preaching, which is really good.
It's probably a relief.
Yeah. So as we start to make our way further down into the book of Matthew today, Steve, man, this one for me is it's where the rubber meets the road. This is where I'm living. I think we are living as culture. This idea of the law and how do we faithfully live out the commands of Jesus in a world and in an area that we're often not even really sure we want to, or what does it mean to live out these live out the rules and regulations, and is this really the nature of following Jesus?
Well, and the Sermon on the Mount sets a high ethical bar for our behavior. And here's one of the keys to it, that when we read it, we often think there's no way. And believe me, there's going to be stuff in here that will challenge even the best of us about anger, and we're going to be told to love our enemies. We're going to be told to forgive. There are things in here that are extremely hard to do, and we think there's no way. But at the heart of it is, the only way you can do these things and be this is to be transformed. So you have to become a whole new person.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think we do have to set a little bit of the stage about this. So I teach disciple Bible study, and then that's often a good conversation starter for us when we start thinking about, and I've said the phrase, Old Testament Christians, that really believe that the way to relationship with God is by being obedient to the laws, obedient to the rules. It was what the Pharisees understood. A lot of the Psalms, a lot of the Proverbs, a lot of the Bible does say that the way to live in relationship with God is to be faithful to the law. Law is perfect, all of that. And yet
it's almost impossible to do.
It's 633 laws we've identified.
I thought it was 613.
Something like that.
I'm the scholar here. Come
okay,
on.
613. Professor Autrey.
Watch that be wrong.
It's over 600.
But the idea, and here's I think what Jesus encountered. One way to think about it. The law is the roadmap on how to be in relationship with God. It's not God.
Right.
But the Pharisees forgot that it was a roadmap, and they more or less fell in love with worshiping the law, not the God that the law pointed to. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair, and their sense of righteousness, living in the right relationship with God, was based on an understanding of we live out the law well.
Yeah.
And yet, what I think Jesus is teaching, and we'll get into that in a minute, is more about how we live in a relationship with God is how we live more in relationship with one another.
And if you want I think a pretty good image of this, the first season of The Chosen, which I think is very well done and is available on all kinds of platforms. I think it's up on Netflix right now. But you get this image of the Pharisees show up, and they don't want to be anywhere near the bad part of town. There's some people in there who are clearly undesirable. And so they do everything they can to avoid that, to uphold their purity. It's a very not graphic, but a very good way for us to see that the distinction, the way the Pharisees held themselves above and apart from everyday people. And so when Jesus comes and begins to teach, they're like, "Who are you to teach?" Where did you get your degree from?
Where's your credentials
Where are your
from?
credentials? And more than that, look who you're associating with. Those fishermen, that guy there, really, no. Her over here, well, I heard she was a prostitute. And so the idea is Jesus shows up to show us who God really is. And at the heart of what the Jesus experience is that. Here's definitively how we understand God. And in Christianity, how do we know God? We know God through who Jesus is. And so Jesus comes to show us that in flesh and blood, but also to show us how to understand God through his teaching.
So we just made in our disciple class, we made the leap from the Old Testament, and last week we started on the book of Matthew. And just the stark contrast between the real nature of the witness from the Old Testament to the New Testament is profound. The Old Testament, man, I've had people read it and they go, I don't even know who this God is. People are killed in the name of God. It just seems like a very different experience of God from the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Well, not just people, women and children are slaughtered
absolutely.
by God's command.
And people often ask me, how are we supposed to hold that? And the only answer I have, and the only way I know to answer that question is, we had an incomplete knowledge until we saw Jesus. When we saw Jesus, we could see God in the flesh. We could see the truer experience of God that we could wrap our minds around.
Right. And one way to think about this is most of us have been to the eye doctor. I think what you got there?
I go to them often.
Right.
And you had those.
That experience of, so I'm, I guess, nearsighted, meaning I can read this, but I can't see what's across the room. So that's what my vision needs to be corrected for. And so the eye doctor, back in the old days, like when you were a child, back in the dark ages.
Pre-scientific ages.
Well, we used to do that the vision check at school. And the vision chart never changed, right? But you could, I guess, possibly memorize it to get it all right. But the experience of going to the eye doctor and having them flip over, focus in this or this. And maybe the frustration when you get to the point where you can't tell the difference, right? This one better or this one better. And I'm always like, well, go back. No, which one is? But you know what it feels like? Most of us know what it feels like to have our vision corrected through a lens. Yeah. And so when Jesus comes, just think about, to me, the God of the Old Testament is that vision is incomplete. And then Jesus comes to correct our vision to show us who God really is. And so when we read the Old Testament through the lens of who Jesus is, we can look back and go, that's more representative of who the people were in that time and place than it was of the totality of who God is.
Dude, I'm going to give you props on that. That worked. I actually could understand it. I could see that image.
Right. See, I'm a great communicator. You just don't know it because you're too busy thinking. You don't listen. If you notice that, you don't. You're more.
Did you say something?
You're more interested in what you're going to say next than listening to me.
That's right.
We need to. Maybe we should go to counseling.
Couples counseling. All right, we're killing each other today. So what we're going to do over the next couple of days is talk about what Jesus, how he teaches about the law. And we're going to be surprised. Jesus doesn't destroy and say, oh, forget about all that stuff. Yeah. Look, listen to what I say. Jesus goes on to really offer a sense for us to say, yes, we're still connected to that law, but this is the lens through which we see that law now. And a really corrective look.
And we constantly need that correction. Yeah. And Jesus is the only one who can provide it.
Yeah. So tomorrow we'll listen to what Jesus has to say when we get to this idea. He didn't come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it. And that'll be our subject for tomorrow. Right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.